So, I don't know about you, but I get the impression that a lot of people in Britain are currently unhappy with the state of affairs. There's constant political scandals and there's always this daily sprinkle of the Brexit calamity to make it that little bit sweeter. And when we look at recent news stories like the Shamima Begum story, the characterisation of Winston Churchill, they're often polarised in the sense that it's a yes, no, for, against solution to very complex and intricate problems. And Brexit is probably the biggest example of this. It sets out a way that we have to pick a team, we have to pick a side. And what this does is it opens the door for social division and hate. And although I suppose we could argue that as a society we are becoming more progressive, at the same time we could also say that we're becoming more divided. And I speak to a lot of people and they always talk about, they have this sort of pessimistic attitude of, well, we can't change anything, so what's the point? And it's a very dangerous attitude to have. When we don't challenge the status quo and we don't ask questions of it, it can be a dangerous thing. But how do we even change the status quo? Is it possible? And if so, how? Well, I believe we can, and we can do that through theatre. So my name is Jay, and I'm a theatre director, born and raised here in Brum. Growing up, I didn't really have access to theatre. I didn't go to the theatre, I didn't watch any theatre, I didn't take part in any kind of theatre activity. It was always something that was not for me and had this sort of environment around it that I feel I couldn't be a part of. And it wasn't helped by high ticket prices and a lack of stories really, a lack of stories that appealed to someone like me, being a mixed race young man from Birmingham. My drama teacher, she was one of the few teachers that had faith in me at school. And she started to open my mind to it and start planting the seeds that theatre could be for me. And I was going through a lot mentally at school at that point in my life. And theatre became my escape. It became my way of dealing and processing my issues and the things that I was going through. After school, I jumped straight into college and I picked A-level drama and A-level English. And if I'm honest with you, I absolutely hated it. All I did was, in my opinion, is I looked at grammar and Shakespeare and it made me feel academically stupid. So I just quit. The following year, I went back and I did a BTEC in Performing Arts. And for me, it allowed me to find that escapism feeling again. And it allowed me to find that sort of connection and love with theatre and drama. After college, I was so done with the education system that I just decided I'm just going to get a job. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to earn money and live my life. And it was all right for a couple of years. But after a while, I started to miss that feeling of wanting to be part of something more and to have that escapism. So at the time, for me, I did something quite radical, which was I applied to go to drama school. I got in and I studied something called community drama. And it was here that I really started to understand the power that theatre can have. I started to learn that you can use theatre beyond the means of just entertainment, that you can use theatre as a tool for change. And by taking part in workshops at drama school, it allowed me to explore my own behaviours, my own toxic behaviours, and my own traumas. And it gave me a process to deal with them and understand why I do the things that I do. And it also gave me a scope of how I can then shape that to then start to shape the world and create the sort of world that I want to live in. Fast forward a few years, and I'm lucky enough to say that I work in theatre. And I probably not in a traditional sense, so I work with a lot of people in different contexts, different situations, and we make theatre together. And there's always one thing that we seem to have in common, and it's this feeling that theatre is not for us. Yet theatre is actually the thing that's brought us together and allowing us to have that relationship. For example, I worked in a school up in Manchester, just near Manchester, in 2013. And I was going to work on this theatre project with a group of lads in this school who were all about to be kicked out of the school. And we decided it'd be a good idea to do weekly drama workshops with them over about a 4-month period. And let me tell you, at first, it was chaos. Everyone in that room didn't want to be there. They were literally throwing chairs at each other, trying to fight each other. Like the first few sessions were madness. But eventually, we started to listen to each other and respect each other. And what we started to do is we started to listen, and the lads realised they had spaces to play, to explore, and to understand why they do the things that they do. And they did all this through theatre. We would act out scenarios, and they'd identified people who they thought their negative behaviour was affecting, whether it was family members, teachers, their friends, and we began to explore what that meant to them. And it allowed them to step into other people's shoes, and they developed empathy. And when we start to develop empathy, it can be a really powerful thing. So they worked towards a performance event, and they actually decided, a group decision, they decided they were going to come in during their Easter holidays, much to all the teachers' beliefs. And they actually did that because that's how committed they were to this project. And they performed eventually to just an audience of their family members and their teachers. And what you have to understand is the teachers and their family had only seen them in a specific way. And for them to get on stage, tell their own story about who they are in the world and reflect on that in front of an audience is such a powerful thing. So I'm going to talk about another little example. There's a theatre director called Augusto Boal, and he was quite prominent in the late 50s, early 60s. And he pioneered this method of working where he would work with performers and work with local communities. And he would ask for suggestions from the audience. So there would normally be a character or a situation happening on stage where a character would be feeling or experiencing some type of oppression. And he would ask the audience for a suggestion for the actor to do for some way to overcome that. And one day, apparently, there was a woman in the audience that was so frustrated because the actor couldn't understand her suggestion that she just came down onto the stage herself and performed it. And this was a breaking point for Boal. He started to understand that actually people want to be empowered and people can actually have their own say. And it kind of birthed what we now know as forum theatre. So he discovered basically that through participation, you can empower people and people can take active roles. And it was the birth of this idea of, so he has this theory, so he calls, as an audience, we're a spectator, but he birthed the idea of the spectator. So someone that's not just an active participant and listening, someone that actually steps out of that to make a change. Now, the military government in Brazil at the time feared this level of activism that Boal was doing so much that they literally kidnapped him off the street, tortured him, and kicked him out to Argentina. Now stop and think about that for a second. A man was kidnapped, tortured, and kicked out of his own country for making theatre. It literally sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But it's true, that's what happened. And it goes to show that in certain contexts, how powerful a tool theatre can be. So, I'm not saying that now to solve all the world's problems, what we need to do is just go upstairs in the rehearsal room and make a play. There's a theory of change that I work with, which is the point I'm getting to. And when you combine it with theatre, it can be a powerful thing. And it goes like this: change yourself, change your community, change the world. Let's take that first step, change yourself. Using theatre, we can understand ourselves, our thoughts, and our behaviours. And then when we do that, we can change them. We can be our own catalyst for positive change. We can take ownership of the things that we can control and we can influence. If there's one thing all of us in this room can control, it's what happens in our minds. I think there are many ways of exploring that step, but I believe taking part in theatre activities can be a really powerful one and an effective one. As a consumerist society, we're influenced by various means to look and focus inwards at ourselves, and we revolve our existence around this idea of the self. The majority of products, from electronics to shoes, books to kitchens, are marketed to us as individuals. We have advertising that literally suits you, and the issue with this is the language trickles through these different media platforms and into our lives, and with that same, and combined with the instinct of just wanting to be happy as humans, it makes us say things like, I just want to be happy, I just want to live my best life. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing to focus inwards. We as humans just want to live happy lives, so why shouldn't we? But what happens if we attribute a portion of our focus to understand the connections we have with each other and the world? Because then we can explore that connection, embrace them, and using theatre, we can even dare to change them. Which brings us to the next step: change your community. If enough of us start to change our behaviours, we can then start to change our communities. We can embrace the individual changes we make together And theatre can provide the space for us to do that. And it doesn't have to be from taking part. It can be from watching a piece of theatre that challenges your beliefs or your thoughts, and through its narrative and story allows us to feel for a character and feel empathy. And empathy opens the door to understanding, which leads to change. We use the phrase, "my body is a temple," which makes us do what's best for the body. When we're sick, ill or injured, we seek help, we find ways to fix it. And many of us also talk about the fact that there's something that does need to change with society. And when we use the word society, it's me included, it's also almost as if we're outsiders looking in, like we're not part of it. But what happens if we start embracing the fact that we are connected and actually engaging in this idea of we are part of society? As humans, if something is making us unhappy in our individual lives, we're proactive, we change it. We can apply this way of thinking outwards to society and our local communities. And like I said, there are many ways you could probably advocate change, but again, theatre can be that catalyst. What happens when an entire community see their own story represented on stage? What power can that actually have? It can allow us to engage in new perspectives, not just as individuals, but as members of families, members of communities, and members of society. Which takes us to the next step, change the world. When we have enough collective energy as communities, towns, as cities, that's when we start to influence the world. When our ideas are unified, we learn we don't just have to be passive onlookers, and we can take that approach that Boal had. We don't have to be spectators, we can be spectators to the world that we live in. We have the power and ability to create sustainable change because now it's ingrained in our thinking. What happens if we apply that previous mantra, "my body is a temple," and replace the word body with society and start treating our society as a temple, and everything we put into it is good for it and is fulfilling and good? If our communities begin to collectively feel empowered, imagine the possibilities. And this is what theatre can do. It can show us those possibilities. A famous revolutionary once said, "Let the world change you, and then you can change the world." So we need to respond to the world around us, understand it, listen to it. Then when we apply this way of thinking to theatre, or any arts for that matter, we can then challenge it, ask questions, and provoke the status quo. And eventually we can create change. So embrace change, embrace reflection, understand why you do the things you do and how they are influenced by the world. Listen to other people's stories, understand them. The first step to positive change is a small one that you can make right here in your mind. And remember, individually, you have a voice, but collectively, you have power. And theatre can provide the space for us to unify that voice and share it with the world. I'm going to leave you with a quote from a practitioner called Bertolt Brecht, and it goes like this: "Art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it." Thank you.